Welcome to the Literacy Association of South Africa's Women's Day celebration. And today we are celebrating women in literature. And I have the honor and pleasure to be interviewing Nangamso Mtsatse, who is the CEO of Funda Wande. Funda Wande is an organization that aims to ensure that all children in South Africa can read with meaning and comprehension by the time they reach 10 years old in their home language, if I'm right, Nangamso.
Yeah.
Nangamso is busy studying for her PhD at Stellenbosch University, and she's also a researcher at the Research on Socioeconomic Policy group. She's published...
Long.
Is that wrong?
Long. Very long.
Long, absolutely. She's also published in journals, and in January 2019, she was selected by the International Literacy Association, the ILA, to which Lethase is affiliated, as one of the 30 under 30 years old researchers in the world. Congratulations, that was quite something. I've known Nangamso for several years. I first met you at a board meeting. Yes. My first board meeting for Lethase was very exciting, quite a couple of years ago now. And so, obviously you are just a champion of literacy and you're doing such good work in that field. So let us get straight to the topic that we're discussing today, which is what are the areas of literacy instruction we need to focus on in young children to bring about change in the education sector. And I think for the sake of our audience, can you outline for them what have been the issues in literacy in the education sector in that age group under 10 or even older, sure, as we know?
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. I think, before I answer your question, I think it's, I must say it's good to be home. Lethase feels like home to me. And like you said, I think when we met, I probably was in my mid-20s.
Yes, you were young.
I was very young. And also importantly to highlight that I think this exact platform or organization is what had opened my eyes to all things literacy. So it is very exciting, and I'm so honored to be interviewed and to be part of this celebration, because like I said, it's good to be home.
Yes.
I think this is where all things started happening. And fantastic. Also I think being at that time when I sort of started off from the Gauteng sort of committee and being involved in a national committee, being around a community, I felt, a community base of people that were generally invested and genuinely, saw literacy as a social justice matter or issue.
Absolutely.
So I just want to put it out there before we dug right into it.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure. I'm so honored. It's good to be home because I think how I view literacy today has been partially shaped by my interactions at Lethase and with Lethase members. Okay, so just to put it out there. And to, jump right to it in terms of your question. One of my mentors will always make this quote in Lily Pretorius will always say, how do you play soccer without a soccer ball? And I think this is how I like to this is a metaphor I like to use in order to describe sort of the dying need and urgency to address literacy. Before we can have people that are experts in robotics and entrepreneurship, or president, or a child that wants to be an engineer, whatever the case is, the fundamental skills that is required to be an active participant in the economy of South Africa requires basic literacy skills and as well as numeracy skills. So for me, when we talk about literacy at large, I think we're looking far beyond the age of 10, yes, right? But we're saying, or the question that we should probably be asking ourselves is to say, yes, let's rather intervene sooner rather than later.
Yes.
We've seen historically how much emphasis and how much resources at a sector-wide has been clumped in interventions at the later years of learners' career, learner basic education career, right? Yes. We see how much media attention the matric results get, how much money government spends on these winter schools to prepare kids for the matric results. And we also see the dropout rate in first year in universities, and I mean, it's not like these are students that are not capable. For the mere fact that they were accepted at university and enrolled, yeah, sure, education is multifaceted, and we can't just look at it from just literacy perspective. There are social, economic issues. There are a whole lot of other pieces in the pie that is probably beyond just education factors, right? But we're saying, or at least I'm saying, is to say there are critical skills that we cannot wait till a learner or a child is in grade 11 or 12. These are things that we need to address from get-go. Now, we know through research the benefits of being taught in mother tongue and how that allows one, if that foundation has been solidified, enables you to move between different languages, right? And because of our historical context in South Africa, the inconsistency in teacher training in regards to foundation phase, the lack of insights or research that now it's become a lot better. In the last 10 years, I think we've made significant improvements in understanding how kids learn to read in African languages, and particularly in those early years. So, I mean, in a nutshell, in a long-winded way around Table Mountain and Lions Peak, what I'm saying is that it is crucial. Before we can talk about entrepreneurs, before we can talk about increasing the number of engineers, increasing the number of doctors we have, teachers, and so on, we need to actually address the problem from where it begins. Our unemployment rate in South Africa is severe. Yeah. And the question of how are we preparing our learners today in the system to be those active participants in the economy. And for me, it says it all boils down to the fundamentals of literacy. And I know this is not numeracy, but as well, we can add numeracy to it.
But you can't even be numerate in the long term if you aren't able to read. I mean, you've got to be both in order to be able to use numeracy at a higher level. So yeah, they both go hand in hand.
Sure. And I mean, now we talk about reading across the curriculum. We know that reading will be required in most instances, right? And not just in language teaching. You're required to read in history. You're required to read to some sort of reading for meaning, for science, and so on. So this is for me, I see it as the underlying basic principle to education. And capitalizing on addressing or targeting reading in the foundation phase to better prepare our learners in the system. One, to do the crossover to English. I mean, as it stands, we all know it's at grade 4, debatable. I also know that there's a whole debate going around on whether that is too soon.
Yes, I completely agree that that's a very hot topic at the moment.
That is a hot topic, but in any case, you will require some level of literacy or reading ability for the rest of your education career. So, and I mean, it's even when we talk about reading and literacy, it's even the learning gaps when we have to look at things like social and economic status of the learner, the type of school that they're in, so quantile. And a lot of these things we can associate, or there's a strong correlation to SESs and some other indicators to reading outcomes, which is actually sad after how many years have we been in democratic South Africa that we are still seeing
too long, and it's still the same problem.
It's still the same problem. So for me,
I mean, we have to tackle it, and what you're saying is that we need to tackle it sooner rather than later. And we've made progress in the way that home languages are taught, but it's only in the last 10 years, which is a relatively short period of time. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about how Fundawanda, what Fundawanda does, in that regard, obviously approaching children at a very much younger age, and how you go about your programs?
Sure. So, I mean, like you mentioned earlier on, we are an NGO, and I think our approach to trying to understand, or in trying to provide evidence, or to trying to provide models that can be scaled. Yeah. And I often describe Fundawanda as an experimental hub. As a space that wants to figure out these things, and probably using philanthropy, funding, or money to be able to experiment and provide proof of concept and lobbying, whatever that looks like, because we're currently also in pilot phase, and I'll speak to that shortly, and lobbying for at least a proof of concept that we know that works, that can be scalable. So that's the one thing. That's what we do.
Yeah.
How we approach that is we call, or we say, we see teachers as central, as the central engine in driving improvement in literacy, and we are committed in trying to understand how do we. What are the different ways in which we can use teachers as the deliverer, or as the engine of implementing the curriculum in improving literacy outcomes. So in that way, we basically have programs that where we develop learning and teaching materials in African languages. We are currently exploring the expansion of in-service training. At the moment, it's just available at Rhodes University as an advanced certificate. But what does that look like then? The next sort of step from that, which is actually just currently being evaluated, and there's a report out, but to say, then what does that look like in pre-services? I know there's a whole work that's also happening with printed and discussions and frameworks that has been done. And also so not only the high quality resources, but also the pre and in-service training of teachers. And I think a big element of it, and particularly what I will be specifically focusing in the next few years for Fundawanda, is how do we get a broader community working together. Fundawanda is a small little piece of pie. There's many organizations and people that have been working in this field for years. And the only way in which we can get this or get closer to our goal is that we take more of a collaborative approach and collaborative approach, and also closely working together and trying to share learnings, findings, and seeing, because I also get a sense of reinventing the wheel in the sector.
Yeah.
So as much as a program that is being currently implemented in 3 provinces, that's Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Limpopo. And these 3 provinces are also exploring different models of using these high quality materials, these types of trainings that we have. For instance, in Eastern Cape, there's coaches. In Western Cape, we work directly with subject advisors. In Limpopo, we're experimenting with unemployed youth as teachers' assistants. So, like I said, pilot phase, we're trying to figure out a proof of concept.
Yeah.
But also the next phase will heavily focus on saying, right, as a sector, how do we collaboratively and collectively try to address the gaps in literacy outcomes in South Africa?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that makes sense, because there are many organizations, and it makes sense if everybody collaborates and we cover the entire country. Nangamso, what about the ECD sector? I mean, obviously there it's seeing children preschool, and at the moment it still falls under the DSD, but I mean, so much more work could be done. It's in that sector, it's got so much potential for literacy development.
Sure, and I mean, this is one also guilt that people that work in sort of grade 1 to 3, that I'd like to say. I mean, I'm talking for myself right now. Let me not generalize. is that we forget about the emerging literacy stuff, and we forget about the wealth of skills and foundational skills that kids come into school, formal school, with. I do, my personal view on sort of the migration. I mean, now it's been announced that ECD is going to be with DBE, and there's currently plans and actions that are currently ongoing to try and migrate it to be part of DBE. I do, and it saddens me to see that there is very little even funding that's allocated to that field. I do know of many organizations, and I sit on WordWorks board and that are working in that space, which is important. I think for ECD researchers, they probably sitting and say, hey, before you're talking about foundation phase, early grade, we probably also need to, it all starts in ECD, right? Which is a fair argument. So I do think that there probably needs to be a lot of one, collaboration between the two sectors, so early grades and ECD. I do think that we probably, in terms of raising awareness and opening up funding opportunities for organizations to explore, to experiment, and to be able to bring forward evidence base of how to, what is the best practice in ECD, what is best practice, but also at the same time feasible for scale. Although, probably there is good reasons why interventions will work in small schools, 5 schools, 10 schools, 20 schools, with justifiable reasons. But I think if we're trying to address these inequalities, we're talking about thousands of schools, we're talking about millions of learners. Exactly. And this is why I'd like to encourage, researchers, NGOs, partners that are working in the ECD space to constantly reflect, to take a moment to reflect, to say, is this scalable? Is this a model or an intervention that one day government can take up for themselves? And I think from a philanthropy perspective, a funder perspective, is that they're not trying to do government's job. And that's also including Funda Wande. We don't see ourselves replacing government, but more supporting government initiatives and supporting government to reaching their goal. And I think that is critical in the way in which we think about addressing this issue. So ECD, in a nutshell, I mean, compared to early grade and even to the higher grades, has probably experienced the most less attention, if I may put it in that sense, probably, and attention in all spheres. And I think it's about high time, and I hope that the migration to DBE will then will help in putting ECD on the table, and we'll make it a political agenda, because I mean, I talk about education and literacy as a social justice.
Completely is.
So I'm hoping, and I know that there's a huge community of organizations, individuals, researchers that are working in the ECD space, and I'm optimistic, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the two sort of foundation phase and ECD sector can work closely together.
Once they're under the same umbrella, of DBE, which will be helpful in many ways. Unfortunately, we are sort of out of time, a little bit over time, but I wondered if you wanted to sort of finish off with one thing that you would like to put out there, one message you'd like to put out to our audience.
Sure, I think, and probably more, it's more sort of me personally, sort of putting it out there, is we need to start as a sector, as communities, we need to start thinking about, like I mentioned earlier on, literacy as a social justice issue and matter. I think we need to be actively, as a collective, lobbying for the kids that are in those classrooms that they don't have the capacity to, or probably they cannot stage a protest now, right? We're talking about kids that are 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. So we need to ensure that we are the voice for these kids that can't go out there and, you know, strike, you know, or whatever the case is. And I see my role, or as myself, Nangamso, as a voice for those kids, and particularly those that are sitting in poorer schools with marginalized and very dire situation, you know. But I think probably as a collective, as a community, literacy community, to say, what does the South Africa that we envisioned for our generation look like, and what are we doing about it today, and what is your key contribution in trying to reach that goal of that South Africa that we envisioned? So I think, I mean, you know, just to leave on that is to say it probably takes all of us, and up until we have all the right people around the table, and inclusively so, I think probably this matter is not seen as a critical matter yet. So, yeah, that's what I would like to leave you with today, Kay.
Thank you. I mean, I think we've only just sort of got to the tip of the iceberg in this conversation, and we've gone over time. So perhaps we can pick up at some point and continue this with sort of, you know, to growing the conversation, because I think collaboration is really the key in improving the literacy of our young people. Thank you for all the work you do in this field. And we're so happy that you're associated, that we can chat, and that you and Latasa have a relationship, as we do with many other NGOs, and we hope to get talking to a variety of you over time. Thanks, Nangamso, very much for your time.
Thanks, and keep up the good work that Latasa is doing. They play a very critical role in this whole discussion. So yeah, it's only a pleasure.
Thank you.